Hey, Susan Palmer of Lead Cat Press here. This is my weekly studio update. Thanks so much for tuning in. This week I'm going to follow a similar format as last week. So we're going to cover technique, scales, theory, reading, all of that stuff. If you want to just link to the section that is most interesting to you, then those chapters should be available in the description below. But let me tell you about what we're covering. So for the technique, we're going to kind of follow up on what we did last week with those wobbly thirds, and we're going to take them through all of the keys, so all 12 major scales in the fifth position area. For the reading section, I'm showing you a study that I've been working on from a Barry Galbraith book that I think is really challenging and really fun. For the scales and soloing, I'm going to direct you to some bass vamps, and we're going to talk about some scale patterns that you can use over those bass vamps. For the chords and groove, I'm going to be showing you, kind of breaking down something that I shared on YouTube earlier this week. I've got some chord diagrams in the video for you, and it's for a 2-5-1 chord progression that's, I don't know, it's got some alterations to it, which I think you might enjoy. For the theory section, I want to talk about why some notes sound awesome in your solos and why some notes maybe don't sound so awesome. And for the tune this week, we're going to do Mr. PC, which is one that I've been working on with a few of my students. So I hope you enjoy this week's episode. Thanks again for tuning in. Last week I showed you what I call wobbly thirds, which is taking the thirds from a major scale and half stepping into the first pair of thirds. So instead of C, E, play B, C, E, C sharp, D, F, and so on. And you can check out the other video if you need more of an explanation. So the first round of exercises, what I have students do is play that in 5 positions in the key of C. So we did that last week. So this week, I want to do the next thing, which is to play that exercise in all 12 keys. And this time I'm going to stay right around the 5th position. I just think that's a great place for guitar players to know really well. You got a lot of range there, sounds good, and it's pretty easy. It's pretty comfortable to play right there. So here is the key of C. So I made a reel this past week, or a short, using those chords, and I thought I'd share that and break it down a little bit more for you during this video. So what I've got here, I think of this as a B string root E minor 7 chord, followed by an A7 with a sharp 5 and a flat 9, and then I lower the 5, I keep the flat 9 there, so I have an A7 flat 5 with a flat 9, and then a D major 7 chord with this really cool drop 2 voicing there that's so spacey. I love it. So this is a 2-5-1 chord progression, but instead of playing just 2 chord to a dominant 7 chord to a 1 chord, over that 5 chord, I'm playing 2 altered chords. I'm playing an A7 that has a sharp 5 in it, and followed by an A7 that has a flat 5 in it. It's just that little bit of movement there that makes it interesting. So have fun with that. For the scale section this week, I want to point you in the direction of my website. I'm building out a page there that's got 12 bass vamps, as well as tons of different scale patterns. And I know last week we went over the melodic minor scales, so I've got all those patterns up there, along with other scales that you might find interesting. So give that a look. I'll drop the link in the description below. For the theory this week, I want to go over something that came up with one of my beginning students. He was playing over a blues in the key of A, so we had the chords A7, D7, and E7, and I had him soloing just using an A minor pentatonic scale. It's kind of my go-to scale when students are new to guitar. It offers a lot of possibilities, but it's not, it's not the most advanced scale to play. And the question came up, why do some notes that I play sound good at certain times and kind of terrible at other times, or not so good at the least? And which is a great question. And so we had this nice discussion about chord tones. And in a nutshell, the notes that are going to sound the best are going to be the notes that are in the chord. So if you're playing an A7 chord, or playing over an A7 chord, then the notes that are in that chord, we have A, C sharp, and E, and G. So those are 4 notes that are in that chord, and wherever you play those, the arpeggio of that chord, those notes are going to sound really great. So the D7 chord has a different set of 4 notes. We have D, F sharp, A, and C. And so if I play those notes all sound great over a D7 chord. So what was happening is during his solo, I was playing that A7 chord, and he was hitting the note C, which sounded kind of terrible because we get this, I'm playing C sharp here, that's in the chord, and then I'm playing another C right here that he was playing in his solo, and it's got a lot of tension in there. And sometimes that tension can be really cool. But other times, if you're not as skilled in the nuance of that note, it can sound really wrong, like I'm just playing it right here. That's not a really, pleasing combination of notes there. So over that A7 chord, if you play C sharp over that A7, so I'm keeping the other notes of that minor pentatonic the same. I still have E and G and A, but I'm half stepping into, I kind of slide into that C sharp there from C, and it sounds really cool. Now over the D7 chord, that has another group of 4 notes in it, and D, F sharp, A, and C. So if I play C sharp over a D7 chord, that sounds really terrible. So for the D7 chord, you really want to highlight that note C. So, and if I play just chord tones or just the arpeggios to those 2 chords, you can kind of hear those chords passing even though I'm not playing the chords. If I play... So you could hear that, you could hear that A7 and then that D7 in there. So chord tones are super, super cool because of that, but it also makes playing just that minor pentatonic scale a little bit tricky. So that was our discussion, and this is a really big topic, I think. I wrote my second book, The Guitar Lesson Companion Volume 2, is all about chord tones and learning them all over the neck and all the different positions and all the keys. I think it's super, super important to do when the time is right. I always like to start students off with just the basic scales so that they get the idea of, they use their ears first of all and can, analyze it as they're playing. Does that sound good or not? What can I do to make that sound good? A lot of times it's just moving a note up or down a half step to make something fit that chord progression. So, my advice is to always experiment with those. Like, we have this minor pentatonic scale. You may be familiar with the notes that are in each chord, or at least those chord shapes. So use a combination of that minor pentatonic scale to kind of give you, the feelings and the basic recipe of sound, basic recipe of notes that you can choose from. But then, use your ear to venture outside of that pentatonic scale. Just see what happens. Experiment. Go a half step up or a half step down and see if you can logically make sense of what you're playing. The next step is, after you've learned your pentatonic scales and your major scales and your soloing, and you kind of reach, there's usually a point I notice with students where it's time for them to learn chord tones. And so that's a whole big study, as I said. But I usually like to get students just using their ear and just some basic facility on the instrument before we head down that road of memorization and ear training so extensively. So that's my advice, and I hope that's helpful for you.